Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first talk after lunch on the India Culture and Collaborations track. Just some housekeeping. If you have any questions or if later on during the Q&A session, please raise your hand so I can run the mic over to you because this is being recorded, so it helps to have the question recorded as well. And don't be afraid to make me run. I need the exercise. So. All right, with that, I have the honor of introducing Damien Eversman from Red Hat, and he will be telling us about why automation in the first place. Damien.
All right. Wow, okay. So again, the title of this talk is Why Automation in the First Place? And I think most of you have probably started answering that question for yourselves because you're here, but it's more of an issue of convincing the people you work with. And then of course and no, you won't automate yourself out of a job. We'll cover that one too. That's one of the main objections that we get a lot. So I'm supposed to share my automation story with you. I've been with Red Hat now for about 4 years, and Red Hat acquired Ansible about 3 years ago. And so that's actually when I got started with Ansible. So I've been using it for about 3 years. That said, even though I got my start just 3 years ago, I use it pretty extensively. I'm in sales, I travel around a lot, I set up lots of demos, and that's probably one of my biggest use cases is being able to reset up demo systems all the time. And it's not just Ansible demos. I set up OpenShift demos, I set up Linux and satellite demos, and all of these demos, almost in every single case, are totally set up through Ansible playbooks. So we'll talk a little bit about who I am. My name's, again, Damien Eversman. I've been with Red Hat for almost 4 years now, but I've been in IT for over 25. Started off in development, don't throw anything. I was a developer and then a development manager, spent some time as a systems engineer, which is a fancy term for a guy who pushes buttons. Then I kind of went back into the development side of things and became an enterprise architect. In that time, I also spent a little bit of time working with the University of Toledo in Ohio. I actually have a degree there. Actually, I have 2 degrees there. But I worked there as an educator for a while too. I was a lecturer and I also helped out with some of the labs. And then finally, I moved into sales. And now I am a solutions architect for Red Hat. I'm what you call an account solutions architect, which means my focus is the customer, not the product. So I get to know the customer, I get to know what it is that you guys do, what you need, and then I help you find solutions from within Red Hat. We have a range of architects, account solutions architect, close to the customer, and we have all the way up to domain architect, who's a huge specialist on product. And you've probably heard from some of them here, and if not, they'll also be running the workshops. There's all my info if you want to go look me up. I don't do the tweet thing. I just never really got into it, but I am on LinkedIn. I am Damien at Red Hat. Just got lucky, I guess. And a lot of my stuff, including a lot of those playbooks that I talked about for setting up development environments, are on my GitHub. Feel free to check them out and tell me how bad they look. And I put my QR code up there if you want to link to me in the app. That's the QR code thing that everybody keeps scanning. Thought I'd give that a try. Who am I really? All right. I'm in Chicago. That building right there, right about there is where the Red Hat office is. We look out our windows right at Sears Tower, or Willis Tower if you've never lived in Chicago, because that's what they apparently call it now. This is my family. I actually took them to our sales kickoff this year because it was in Orlando, and they promptly left me. But that's my family right there, my wife and 2 kids, and then our dog that thinks she's another human member of the family. Anyway, why are we here today? You're not here to see my family pictures. We're here to answer the question, why automation? Now, many of you, again, you're here already, so you probably already have been formulating an answer to this question. We'll cover this one a little bit. Why are people afraid of automation? And this kind of comes from how can you get buy-in in your company, in your school, in your government office, right? I work for public sector, so for me, buy-in means getting state CIOs to sign off on things. And how can you help your organization adopt Ansible automation? So let's jump right in with why automation. Well, number one, because it's where all the money seems to be going these days, right? If you look at the statistics here, in 2018, we ran a survey asking about the top 3 priorities that most tech leaders had. And cloud infrastructure was a big one there. Automation was in the top 3, but cloud infrastructure was the main one. This year, automation took the lead. And this is a big thing that we're seeing across the board. And it's not just at the corporate level or at the government level, it's all the way down to the workers. Everybody is being asked to do more with less, and automation is really one of the best ways to achieve that. There we go. A little bit of by the numbers, just because they make me put marketing slides in every now and then. A lot of time reduction here. You see 94% time reductions, 84% savings. The big one that I like here is the big one right here on the bottom, and that's less than 3 months to see a payback on Ansible Tower. This is not a high number. This is actually an average number. Okay, we have customers that see payback within the first few weeks of getting Ansible up. Yes, they're outliers. Whenever you adopt a new technology, it normally takes a little bit of time to get up and running. But the fact that the average is less than 3 months, I think, speaks volumes to how easy it is to adopt Ansible. Why would you use Ansible? Like, most people are like, oh, automation. But what does that mean, right? There are any number of use cases. I've got a handful up here. But really, anything that you need to streamline and anything that you do more than once. Either of those are candidates for automation. So we see managing configuration drift, right? If you're an operator, right, you need to manage a configuration, you have to deal with developers like me constantly tweaking settings, right? And so this is your way of easily going back and fixing those problems. Dealing with a short-staffed or retiring workforce. Believe it or not, Ansible is an awesome documentation tool, right? If you get somebody who's retiring next year to write an Ansible playbook, they have just documented how to do something, and it's that tribal knowledge that's going to be leaving your company that you want to capture, right? We've got coordinating manual tasks, remediating human error, which some statistics say it's 80% of downtime is caused by somebody entering the wrong information. When you put this into a known good playbook, you don't have that problem anymore. Bridging silos across the organization, this one's kind of specific to Ansible. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Attracting fresh talent. Like I said, I work with government institutions, right? And one of the problems that government institutions have these days is getting new talent, right? Their workforce is definitely aging, many of them retiring. And I like to say, you know, when it comes to getting new talent, you really have 2 options. You can either pay them a lot of money or give them cool stuff to do. And most states can't pay them a lot of money. So there's really only one option there. Give them cool stuff to do, and automation is on the cutting edge of that. Strengthening security, maintaining compliance. Again, I have a lot of public sector institutions that have a lot of laws that tell them the way they need to set things up. And they're very, very simple to put into the language of a playbook. I can write a specification for how a system needs to be set up in a playbook, and now I can ensure compliance by running that playbook on a regular basis. So, with all of these good things, why is there so much fear in automation? So, the wonderful Bill Gates, who's like saving the world now, was quoted as saying, people always fear change. People feared electricity when it was invented, didn't they? And I think that's really the case in general. A lot of people get set in their ways and they don't want to change things, and when someone comes in trying to change things, they have a fear that they're not going to be able to keep up. It's the great excuse machine, right? The fear of change gets people being really creative and coming up with reasons for not doing something new. And I'm going to address a bunch of these here, but in general, how many of you have heard at least one of these as you've gone through it, right? We don't have time to come up with a new technology, right? Oh, it's too difficult to document all the steps. It's just much better if I do it like by hand. Or my favorite one is, you can't automate what I do. Right, okay, and then the other one, and the one that we'll address, and it's part of the title of this, is day 1 automation, day 2 layoffs, right? So we'll talk about kind of what that means. So one of the other quotes that I really like to tell people, and I think this is my favorite one, is Charles Darwin that said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." I'm clearly not the strongest of the species. I don't think I'm the most intelligent, but I think I got a chance now, right? I'm willing to change. Come on, there we go. So you can't automate what I do, or we are too unique to automate. So according to the US Census, there are now well over 5 million people in the United States alone that identify as IT workers. 5 million people that all do your job, right? I don't think that any of them would say, you can't automate what I do. They clearly know how to do your job. And I'm sorry, I know everyone here is a special snowflake. I am too. But when it comes to doing our jobs, that's not what we want. We don't want to be special snowflakes. The last thing you actually want to be is the hero, because the hero is the one who gets the phone call every time something goes wrong. We don't have time for a new technology. That's a big one that we hear a lot. And yet, when you look at all of these different customers, I tried to pick a bunch from different countries, different verticals. They all talk about one of the main things that Ansible brought them is time savings, right? 50% reduced time management, IT management time by the British Army. 3,000 hours saved per year by Swisscom, right? We go down here to BLE, which is the German Food and Agriculture Office, right? 50 to 60% time savings in management. And then, of course, one I really like here, HCA Healthcare, diagnoses as much as 20 hours earlier. 20 hours earlier can mean someone's life, right? If we actually use technology to automate the way we go through data and analyze things, we're saving lives. Day one automation, day two layoffs, right? So we have all of these people up here that used to manage all of these tools down here, right? Red Hat, Microsoft Windows, VMware, F5, Cisco, Juniper, all of these things, but now automation has moved in and they're all out of a job, right? Well, that's not really the case, because if you're the one that does this job, then you're the one that writes and maintains the automation. You're the rock star that uses the new tool to do your job faster and better, right? This is an opportunity not to lose your job, but to prove you're the best at your job. Because not only can you take and automate what it is that you do, but as we hear a lot here, you can collaborate and you can share what it is that you've done and become known not only within your company to be able to do things, but also within the community in general, right? Automation is the chance to prove that you're good at what you do. Joe in infrastructure is doing automation already. This is one of my favorite ones. Oh yeah, we've got automation. Someone's doing automation already, right? We have servers, we have cloud, we have network, we have people doing containers and app developers. But what happens is automated silos are still silos, right? Automation has the potential to bridge these silos, to actually make things work better together, right? Isolated scripts, they automate functions. That's great. That makes one person's job a little bit better, a little bit more enjoyable to do. But a culture of automation is what automates the entire organization. It's what makes people be able to work well together, to be able to reach across those silos, to be able to streamline large processes because they're able to work that automation together. It's too hard to think through all the steps. Our processes are too complex. First of all, I'd actually want to talk to this person about their future with my company. But after that discussion, really one of the three pillars of Ansible automation is its simplicity, right? We talk about it being simple, powerful, and agentless, right? Simplicity is the first word in sort of the rallying cry of Ansible. It's human readable, right? And you've all seen the playbooks. You can look at a playbook and know nothing about anything and be able to say, oh yeah, I see what that's doing. You don't need special coding skills. You don't need to learn a weird dialect of Python or some strange version of Ruby or anything like that. It's, as I was told in a session earlier today, simple American English. Because they don't spell with O-U-R in any of the docs, but that's it. Tasks are executed in order, it's really easy to read, and people get productive quickly, right? One of the biggest sales boosts that we get when we go around to different companies and corporations is we ask them, is anybody using Ansible already? Normally they're like, oh no, we haven't brought Ansible in. But then you walk around and you actually talk to people, and everybody's started using Ansible to just automate their job, right? A lot of companies already have that mind share to be able to move forward. It's just a matter of bringing it to the attention of the higher ups. And finally, if for no other reason, Ansible means job security, right? This is, a couple weeks ago, I did a search on some of the more popular job websites. LinkedIn apparently has 20,000 plus job listings for Ansible engineers, right? ZipRecruiter's not far behind, and then Indeed, Monster, Simply Hired, they're all over 5,000 listings containing the word Ansible. This is here and it's not going to go anywhere, right? 86% of IT leaders say automation is either critical or very important. 79% say they need to deploy new management and automation tools in the next year. And they're all hiring Ansible workers, right? This is where you guys need to go. This is where you're actually going to keep yourself a job instead of automate yourself out of a job. And not only that, if you really think through the process, what does automation do? It makes it easier for you to do a large number of things that you used to do. It enables you to be lazy, right? It enables you to enjoy your job more because you spend less time creating new VMs or laying out new network segments or any number of things, and more time actually doing the stuff that engages your brain. Adopting Ansible automation. Generally, it's pretty easy to convince people that automation is a plus, right? You're all here. I think you all already believe that. And if not, hopefully I've convinced you in the last, 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes? 15 minutes. I'm going a little quick here. Hopefully you have a lot of questions. So let's talk about adopting Ansible automation, right? Because this is really important. It's important to you because once you get Ansible into your company, you actually want to use it. It's important to me because once I get Ansible into your company, I want you to renew it a year later, right? If I don't do that, if you guys don't actually adopt it, then we both failed. But the problem is a lot of employees, a lot of people don't adopt things, right? The CIO says, we're going to do Ansible automation, and they buy Tower, right? Buy 10,000 nodes of Tower, and then it sits unused. And then a year later, when they're looking for cost-cutting measures, they say, oh, nobody uses that Ansible thing. Let's cut it out. Oops. So 3 surefire ways new projects fail. And these are the important ones. These are the ones you need to pay attention to as you're trying to bring Ansible into your company. Please don't let Ansible be the shiny thing that grabs your attention, right? I mean, we all saw Up. We all know the dog that's talking, ooh, squirrel, right? Don't let Ansible be the squirrel, right? It's really important that this is something you're going to pay attention to. And the fact that you're here hopefully means, well, that you're not here just because you could get your company to send you to a conference. But it's something you're really interested in. It's not the next shiny thing. I don't want you guys to click a new link tomorrow and forget all about Ansible. Buy a product without a plan to implement it. This is one of the things that I espouse the most when I talk to my customers, right? Much to my account manager's chagrin, right? No, let's not rush in yet. You can buy it a little later. Let's make a plan. And this is really important because the last thing that you want to do is have somebody saying, well, we paid for it, so now you have to use it. Let's have a plan. Let's figure out where we're going to implement automation first. Let's find the groups that are the most likely to get up and running quickly so we can get some quick wins. And then the last one, and my favorite one, is I didn't help choose it, so I won't use it. Right? We live in a world of open source. You all have heard community and collaboration all the time. If you know anything about Red Hat, you know that we espouse what's called the open organization. Open organization means everybody needs to be in on the decision-making process. Doesn't mean everybody gets a vote, right? Decisions are still made by leaders. But in the open org, leaders are well-informed leaders. They're people that actually know what's going on, that have shared the decision-making process with people, that have listened to suggestions, and maybe adopted some of the good ones, right? That's the difference between meritocracy and democracy, right? Any idiot can vote. But in a meritocracy, you actually need to have a good idea before you have a say. So we have a lot of solutions for that too. Workshops, lunch and learns, demos, anything you can do to expose people, to indoctrinate people, to say, hey, look, this is a really cool tool. Even if you're automating your job, it's a good way to say, hey, look, something that used to take me 2 days now takes me an hour, right? Or something that used to take me a week now takes me less than a day. That's the best way to get it going. This is a really important one too. This is why that we bought it, so now you'll use it almost always fails. Anything that's going to succeed in enterprise and really in life needs to benefit the individual first. Which is why you guys, the ones that are here and asking us about automation, you're the ones that are going to go back and you're going to be the standard holders for automation. You can show how it benefits you and your coworkers, and then your team and how your team benefits, and show how the metrics keep getting better and better with closed tickets or created virtual machines or whatever it is that your team does. And that's what gets it to be an enterprise tool. Ansible is really cool. Sitting down at a command line and writing Ansible playbook and running a playbook that you wrote, that's fine, that's exciting, that's great, that helps me get my job done. But it's when I involve other people and we start developing roles and we start using collections and we start bringing in towers so that we can start sharing all of these playbooks among the organization, that's when it's a big benefit. But it's still got to start with that one person typing Ansible playbook at the command line. All right, there we go. Ansible has a role, it has a use case just about anywhere in your organization. There are very few things that Ansible can't automate. If it's not connected to the network, you're probably going to run into some problems, but to be honest, I don't think there's anything, my toaster's connected to the network now. And I could probably automate it if I tried. Start small and grow. Right? Again, pick those low-hanging fruit, whether it's modernization, whether you have a push from the head of your organization to modernize something, right? Or you're trying to migrate from one platform to another, right? If you're trying to move off of a mainframe onto containers, right, which is a nice huge leap and you're skipping over a couple levels there, that's great. Automation is a way to go. DevOps, the biggest buzzword of the decade, right? This is actually a tool for DevOps. Why? Because I can do provisioning, I can do deployment, I can do testing, I can do just about anything within the entire DevOps lifecycle. And if I do it all with the same language, I'm enabling DevOps. I'm enabling a developer and an operator and a security person and a QA person to all operate using the same language. We can all talk about what we do by speaking the language of automation, in this case Ansible. So everything that you do is going to take that individual and give them a benefit. So find champions, find people that are already using it. They're the best people to get things moving forward. So there are a number of ways that you can grow beyond today, right? So today and the rest of this week, you're going to get a lot of information thrown at you. You're going to get a lot of slides and a lot of people like myself waving our arms up here on stage and saying, hey, look at me. But really, there are things that you need to consider moving forward. There's a couple of different things that you can do. There's this conference that we do regionally called Ansible Automates. And what Ansible Automates is it's like a little mini Ansible Fest. It's a regional thing that happens seemingly with no organization. They just pop up all over the place, you know. It's magic. But they happen pretty regularly throughout the United States, at least. Is it in Europe as well? This is a really good way to bring in more of your team, right? Your company's not about to send your entire team to Atlanta if you're not from Atlanta. They might have sent you. But Ansible Automates comes around to the regions, and it takes some of the best presentations that you see in Ansible Fest and gives them to you over the course of a day. A lot of the people that you see speaking are going to be giving the same presentation, but it's your way of bringing in more people and enabling them. You'll see things like some of the technical workshops. You'll be able to do things like write your first playbook, create an Ansible role, install Ansible Tower, and execute your own automations. And let me give you a secret. I was just talking about this with one of the audience members here beforehand. You can actually get someone to come in and do this at your organization. That's what I do on a regular basis, right? If you actually think that your team is going to be interested, or your company or whoever is going to be interested in Ansible, we'll come and do a workshop at your environment to drum up that interest, to show people what it can be at no cost. You just need to get in touch with your Red Hat sales rep and say, hey, can I get an Ansible workshop? Right? I do these all the time. Audiences from a dozen people to 100 people. And it's a lot of fun. We set up an environment in the cloud, one of many clouds, and we walk everyone. Everyone gets their own system that they can go to write an Ansible playbook and then install Tower and use Tower. They learn to write roles. I'm assuming the workshops are going to be updated to start talking about things like collections and that sort of thing now that it's no longer in tech preview. It's an individual environment per participant, and like I said, it can be out in the public like an Ansible Automate session, or it can be at your place of employment. Training and certification. This is a mixed bag, right? There are some employers out there that get it, that training and that certification especially is really important, right? It's your way of proving that you know what you're talking about. A lot of the naive employers out there like to say, oh, all you're doing is padding your resume and making it easier for you to leave. But the wiser of the employers out there realize that the way to make you not leave is to make you want to stay, not make it hard for you to leave. And to that end, training and certification is really big. We have a couple options. We can do specific classes, which has a Red Hat certified instructor to come in. They'll come in and they will teach normally about a week-long class. Sometimes those can end in certification exams, sometimes not. And you can do things like get through Ansible Engine and Tower in depth, right? So it takes that workshop that we squeezed into a day and goes through each of the steps in more detail. It also helps you with some of the best practices and teaches you about Ansible modules. These are really beneficial things for getting things going. Like if you started to have some interest in your organization, if you've stood up Tower, these are the next steps. Our learning group just totally reworked the Red Hat Certified Engineer test and exam to basically be almost entirely Ansible, right? So if you know a little bit about Linux and you want to be a Red Hat Certified Engineer, add Ansible on top of that and you're well on your way. All right. And then finally, collaboration. You've heard this one a lot, right? And this really is of the utmost importance. And it's not just going in and contributing to Ansible code or rewriting the documentation or helping like that. It's taking what you do, whether it's writing a role or a collection and sharing it in Galaxy, right? How many people here have used something off of Galaxy? Right? Very good. It's prepackaged Ansible roles. Now, I'm not saying you should go download it and just run it blindly, but it's a really good starting place, right? You can use, you contribute. Has anybody here actually published something to Galaxy besides me? It's not that hard to do. Like has anybody here authored a role to do something new and interesting? All right, share it. It's not that hard to do, and talk about, you know, getting kudos back from the environment and really making the people you work with see how important automation is. Store everything you do in a Git repository. This is sort of core to everything that is about Ansible, because not only does it help you, enable you to sort of keep your automation as code and track the changes throughout time and all that sort of stuff. By the way, I have a couple customers that actually use Ansible Playbook diffs as their change control. Like change control won't even look at anything unless you have a playbook diff from the current version to the new version. But it also encourages people to come in and actually contribute, right? We talked in a session I was in earlier, the morning session today, where they talked about pull requests and actually making changes. That doesn't have to be at the Red Hat or Ansible level. That can be in your organization. That's a way to start getting more than one expert, more than one rockstar Ansible expert. And finally, right, if you just go out to GitHub and you search Ansible, there are tons of repositories out there. And as we move forward with what was announced today with Collections and Galaxy Hub, it's going to make it that much easier for you to develop content and share content with other people. And really, that's what this automation thing is about. It's about getting all of that information out of people's heads and into a place where you can share it and you can work on it together. And trust me, once you start sharing it, people start looking and seeing, you're the rock star that we can't fire. You're the one that knows how to do this Ansible stuff. You've got all of the good information, and we're going to move forward from there. So that's all I've got in terms of slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, I've been in sales now for about 4 years, and I've been to a lot of different customers, public sector, private sector, federal, state, local government. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about things I've seen or things that they do. Hang on a second. She's going to sprint to you.
Pretty loud too, so. Hey, so I'm trying to get Ansible. I use Ansible, the CLI version. I'm trying to get Tower to an organization that has a lot of different opcos, and I'm trying to make it valuable to like the DBA, the dev, all the different people. Is the best way to pick a small task for them, like some little thing that they can do, and say this is successful, that's successful. Like if we're doing a POC period or things like that. Just pick something small that's important to them and automate that and then show it to them?
That's actually the way, at least in my experience, the way we see the most growth. I mean, I work for an open source company, right? We sell free software. Generally speaking, where Red Hat has flourished the most is starting from the ground up, right? So if I take my Ansible presentation and show it to a CIO, they're not going to be interested in it. But if I can take and show a developer how easy it is to deploy their application or to push their application through a CI/CD pipeline. It doesn't take that much work to show that automation, but when they realize that what you just did is automate something that takes 4 hours out of their week every week, you've now got someone on your side.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
I need more people on my side so that I can
and that's
so
where
they
a
see the
lot of
value.
people
Yep.
are. And that's often the best way. Now that said, there are some groups where you can't go teeny tiny, right? You kind of have to say, look, we have to do this big. Networking is a big one. Often you don't see a lot of teeny tiny things. You see them saying, okay, we're going to deploy this across, 1,000 or 10,000 nodes.
POC environment.
POC
You're doing a
environment,
small
yeah.
thing, you're trying to get into buy-in. You have to kind of keep it small so you can actually
POC
succeed
environments
it.
are big, and like the workshops, you can get help from Red Hat with POCs free of charge.
Okay.
Up here?
Sorry.
Quick question for you. So we did that. We went through that process, POC, and now we're getting ready to start our first MVP, which is standing it up, right? Standing it up and doing some of the playbooks that we did in the use case. My question, though, is who owns it, right? So within the organization, I'm in the engineering and architecture team, but then the first thing that happens now, you get the ops folks going on. Who's going to own it? Who's going to maintain the environment, et cetera, et cetera? What are any suggestions there?
So, like most of the tools that Red Hat has, very often the ownership of the tool ends up on operations, right? I mean, if you look at like our platform as a service, OpenShift, right? That's like an environment that's like awesome for developers, but in the end, it's the operations team that's running the actual software. To that end, that's great. That's actually pretty easy to do. And then what you do is you start moving into that world where you have GitHub repository set up, or Git repositories. It doesn't have to be GitHub. Git repository set up, and you can actually assign the management of those to each of the different organizations, right? The networking team can have their own repository. The development team can have their own repository. You can have a common repository for things like roles and that sort of thing that they can share to and link into, but that gives everybody the ability to still maintain their little sphere of influence and power, but at the same time, using something like Tower, where you can create projects and make those things available, you're enabling other people to sort of see what's going on and participate.
So how would I be able to use the workflows if they're creating their own? And I need to use a workflow because the process goes from left to right, right? If I'm delivering a service, it's going to need networking, storage, blah, 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 blah. How do you see that working?
Well, actually, the workflow is probably the best use case for something like that, right? If you think about what it takes to spin up a VM, right? I need to provision a network segment. I need to provision storage. I need to set up a VM. I need to install software. I need to do all of these things, right? And each one of those things belongs to a different silo in my organization. So what you do is you get those silos each to write playbooks, right? And then those playbooks can be put into projects that are public, right? The authoring of the playbook is still private, right? We hold that back in our GitHub repository that we've got all of our tight security, so only a network person can write a network playbook. But because it's available in Tower, I can now do things like chain those together, right? And put it into a workflow so that each thing happens. And not only that, with our integrations with things like ServiceNow, I can actually have it kick off on its own, right? Someone puts in a request for a new VM, it goes through all of the proper steps in ServiceNow, and when it hits the right approval, that kicks off the workflow in Ansible Tower, which then goes through and does everything. And when it's finished, it can actually go back and put information back into ServiceNow about it being done. Am I recommending that you do that entire workflow without any human intervention? Probably not, but most of it could be automated.
Now, you previously mentioned that Red Hat does a lot of, sessions or workshops at a company, and we have Tower in our organization, and our account team is not the most hands-on, and they don't really interact with us a lot. They can be not helpful. In that circumstance, how would you recommend that we reach out to Red Hat to get one of those workshops? Because there's definitely interest on my team.
I could give you my card. I would hope that your particular sales team would be responsive, but there are always places that you can go higher than that. And then on top of that, we have a lot of first-tier partners that are actually doing workshops now too, and that's something that you can get into. Public sector, commercial? Okay, do you know if you buy direct or go through a partner?
We buy through a partner.
Okay, so if you go through a partner, a lot of times those partners are also enabled to do things like classes and workshops. And so you might explore that. Depending on who your partner is, that might be something that they could do too.
You said that automation can affect your structure, right? Once you start automating, haven't you see that starting to affect the structure of an organization?
It's like the whole DevOps thing, right? The idea is that in this world, we can't stay with these silos, right? We can't be nimble if we have to wait for each silo to react, right? And so you've seen it in development initially, where the whole process involves everybody, right? We have DevOps teams that include testers and QA people and even the stakeholder and that sort of thing. And what that does is that helps you be much more agile when it comes to releasing software. What we're finding is that's not specific to developing an application, right? To keep our entire organization nimble, we need to start reaching out across those silos so that we can do things like setting up environments or pushing, our actual infrastructure through very much of the same path. The really nimble organizations out there, the Facebooks and Googles and Twitters and all, they've been doing this for almost a decade, where literally your organization becomes flat, and you have people that are in certain centers of competency, and they can write and do those playbooks, and then they just get all chained together, right? And that's really the way to take that DevOps concept from application development and grow it out to the entire organization. That answer your question?
So you're saying over time, the organization structure
It's a culture
is going
change.
to change over time, potentially driven by automation, right?
Potentially driven by automation. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a culture change. It really is. There are some forward-thinking companies that have managed to sort of mandate it from above, but more often than not, it's a groundswell and it's a culture change. It's a positive culture change. Most people, when they go through it, they see a lot of benefits, and we saw some of those. But it does take a little time. Any other questions? Wow, they're really getting you to run around.
I hope I don't get crucified for this, but why Ansible? Why not Chef? Why not Terraform? And how do I convince people that Ansible is the right one? Example, we want something with a state, and that only has, we can only do that with Terraform and not Ansible. Is there a way to do that in Ansible?
So what we're seeing a lot with that specific use case is people actually using the Terraform module in Ansible. It exists. There's also a Chef module and a Puppet module. The idea being you don't have to leave your old automation choices behind. And in some cases, right, Ansible may not be the 100 top best tool, right? But the key here is that I can take Ansible and I can put it into the operations people, and I can put it into the developers, and I can put it into security, and each of these people is going to find a huge benefit from it. Most of the other tools out there have a much narrower scope. And generally what we're seeing now is companies, corporations, governments want to shorten the list of tools they have, not lengthen the list of tools. And so Ansible can really help come in and get and enable all of those different groups. Our module catalog is growing by leaps and bounds every year. It's getting larger, and so more and more technologies are sort of being able to be orchestrated by Ansible. In the few cases where there's something that doesn't quite work yet, more often than not, there's a module that will interact with that. And one of the cases that we see a lot of use with is Terraform. So, honest question, honest answer. I think there was one, did you have a question up here?
So in our organization, now it's like a pretty new automation, and we're kind of doing a proof of concept of Ansible. So we have our team, automation team, and let's say there's another team, operations. So what we're doing right now, we're doing some interviews. They give us some use cases. We build the playbooks for them, and we're trying, to hold their hands, make them use these playbooks and so on, because most of them, they don't know, like maybe coding and stuff like that. So is it a good approach? Because I can see like in, I don't know, few years along the line, we can be the only team that is maintaining the playbooks. So what's your take on that?
That might be a good approach for something like a POC or getting started. But in reality, you don't want an automation team. You want those members of that team to be in each of the different groups, right? So you don't want to have infrastructure coming to a different team and saying, can you write a playbook for me? That's not really speeding things up a whole lot. It does give you the recreatable processes and that sort of thing. But what you really want is to enable those teams across the board to be able to do it. Great for a proof of concept, but really what you want is them taking that playbook back and making it their own afterwards. Right? Maybe you kick them off with a basic one to get sort of the initial use case, where like an MVP, a minimum viable product, and then push it back on them.
So basically, we're trying to do that, like engage them, but we got a lot of challenges and pushbacks. It's like this playbook is a total disaster, or this is like it's failing all the time. Although it's not. It's more like if you troubleshoot, it's more the device problem or maybe the way they used it. So it's a lot of resistance. So how can you engage?
Again, this is getting back to that culture change and the fact that it takes a little time, right? There's always going to be pushback. People are always opposed to change, and that's sort of, where you're going to have to work from. And what it is working from that starting point and trying to convince it, right? Okay, maybe this playbook is a catastrophe, but after you tweak it a little bit, all of a sudden they're realizing, oh wait, I can save a lot of time by using this playbook now that they've worked out the kinks. That's when you start trying to push it out. It's not going to be immediate, especially if you're getting a lot of pushback, a lot of people that are resistant to change. But keep in mind there's also attrition.
Just following up on her question, how do you see then if it's spread across, how do you get some kind of governance policies to ensure that they're following some kind of standard in writing these playbooks? Because you're saying push it out. I'm sorry. So I'm just following up on her question. That's a great question.
Yeah, well, so if you go through the Ansible documentation, there's a lot of style guidelines for sort of a starting point for how to write things, right? Because everybody, whether you're a Java programmer or a shell scripter or whatever, there's some styles that you need to put in place. And so following those is a good one because it makes it easier for people in different groups to look at things. But then the next big thing is actually making roles. That is probably the biggest place where you're going to start seeing a jump, right? Because writing a playbook automates your process. Turning it into a role enables other people to do that in the middle of their process. And that's where the real reusability and benefit comes.
I think we're out of time, so if you want to reach Damien for more questions, damien@redhat.com, and also through the app. So thank you, Damien, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.